meeting of the City of St. Pete Beach. Today is Tuesday, January 13th, 2026. It is 6 p.m. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Clerk, if you please call roll.
Vice Mayor Marriott.
Here.
Commissioner Robinson.
Here.
Commissioner Ruznicki.
Here.
Commissioner Maldonado.
Yeah, here.
And Mayor Petrilla.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The first item is the approval of the agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda as proposed, please?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I have one request that we pull or defer slide number 35 from the presentation regarding 702 Paso Grill Way. Commissioner Maldonado, question number 2.
I'm sorry, which item?
It's part of the discussion on 6C.
He just wants to pull the Commissioner Maldonado question number 2 slide.
Okay.
It's 11 of 13 in the presentation, or if you're downloading the entire agenda packet, it's, I think, page 35. It deals with a quasi-judicial item that'll be heard separately later, and we don't want to include it in the legislative review of height.
Okay.
Mayor, I have a few requested changes. I need to remove item 2A. We have a scheduling conflict and would like to move it to January 27th. Presentation regarding the federal legislative update. I'd like to remove consent item 4B. The board member has removed their candidacy, so we need to continue the recruitment process and appointment process for future date. I'd like to remove item 4C, approval of a flexible work policy. I need to do some more internal work on that before I bring it back to commission in the next few months. And we need to pull item 6A, as we are still working with the neighbors on this on this particular plat change.
Do you want to also postpone?
Oh,
5B?
okay. And lastly, we would like to
Continue
continue
5B.
item 5B to date certain February 10th, as we are still working with both stakeholders and we had some last minute information that we need to share with the parties and continue the discussions.
Thank you.
So that will be set for final reading February 10th at 6 p.m.
Any other amendments?
Just an item for discussion. You can call it legislation and resources.
Okay. Any other changes? Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I move to approve the agenda as amended. A second.
City Clerk, if you please, do a roll call.
Vice Mayor Marriott.
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson.
Yes.
Commissioner Ruznicki.
Yes.
Commissioner Maldonado.
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. First item is a presentation on building permits and updates, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Laura Canary, Community Development Director. So this evening, what we have before you is basically an update on building and permitting processes and internal operations. Per your direction after the last meeting and the city manager's direction, there was a series of recommendations and kind of process improvements that we looked at, some of those that we maybe already had underway or that we were considering. And so what we'd like to do tonight is kind of just look at that as in a snapshot format and kind of tell you where we're at today and where it looks like we're heading. And before I get started, I do want to just take a moment because, again, it's building and permitting is the title of it. And so, yes, it is very heavily centric in the community development department. But obviously, when we talk about permitting as a whole, it's interdisciplinary. So we also, some of these improvements, we're going to be working, with those other departments and divisions from fire, public services, planning and zoning within community development, because, again, they all touch the permitting process. And we want to make sure that we're having a comprehensive, holistic approach to how we're doing our process improvements. So let's start with just looking at the actions that we've taken since December. So we've started conducting exit interviews with the volunteers, as well as we have a survey that's out there. So those have been going really well. We've already identified some kind of common themes and common denominators. We are synthesizing that information, and we're going to be doing additional outreach with the contractors as well as internal stakeholders, and then we'll be bringing that information back to you to basically tell you what we've heard. So we're in the process of conducting those interviews now. They're underway. We've established a SOP for standards for communication. This has actually been rolled into, we're calling it our customer service standards, if you will. So it has a lot to do with communication, both internal to the organization, but also with our constituents. But again, that communication piece is rolled into the overall customer service standards. We're also looking, there are certain types of permits that have been issued same day. That kind of changed, of course, after the storms, because equal change out for, say, an AC didn't look the same, as we know. So we're basically going back to not only look at what we've done and been able to issue same day, but what can we expand on. We have identified, we have a couple days throughout the week where we're basically blocking out time to make the building official and the deputy building official kind of have a more open calendar, if you will, so that whether they get a walk-in individual that needs to speak with them on something that maybe a permit technician can't really address, that they have that ability to do so, or they're also available to schedule meeting times if you have a project that you need to just maybe you need a little bit more time and you want to schedule something. So we've made that available. And then for extending evening hours, we're proposing that beginning on the 21st, what we're looking at doing is expanding our operations until 5:30 on Wednesdays. Again, this was just when we talked and went back to the team and kind of gathered their feedback and what they thought. Again, we want to try it and see if it works and then see how it's received. And if it builds a lot of traction or not, then we'll come back to you and report out accordingly. But that was what was proposed as a starting point. So the next, I'm going to break this down in basically the next 90 days, and then we're going to go from day 91 through June 1st. So when we look at what we're calling the 90-day roadmap, again, I touched on those exit interviews that we're compiling the themes. The standards for communication have been rolled into our customer service standards. The same-day permits, we, again, are evaluating what we can expand on. We anticipate that we should have that kind of list compiled and be able to communicate that out in March. Single point of responsibility. So this was something that was suggested with regard to our permit intake. We have kind of changed our processes so that now a permit tech is assigned a permit application, and they take that permit application basically from start to finish. And so again, it creates just kind of more of a liaison, for that permit and for that application. And then of course, just that single point of contact. So that is it's already underway, and we're just gonna assess it for effectiveness as we move forward. But so far, again, it's only been a few weeks, but it seems to be working pretty well. Consolidated reviews. This is a big one. As we peel back and kind of try and identify really where the delays are happening in the permit process, we've identified two things, and I think I've said this before. Number one, kind of on the intake side, again, until we get that completed application and it actually goes into review, so that's on the forefront side. And then once it gets into review, in particular when we have a permit that's requiring multiple departments to review, one of the things that happens is that the applicant may receive comments from one department, and then they think that it's done, and then 2 days later, the comments are coming in from another department. So as we've talked about consolidated reviews, one of our biggest concerns, though, and how we're kind of trying to address this and do the deeper dive is we also don't want to sit on a review. We don't want to hold anything up, and if we already know that building has addressed the 7 comments, we want to be able to communicate that out, but we also want to be able to be very, clear and provide clarity that there's still, say, fire and that needs to review this, for example. So we're working on that, and that we anticipate to be able to bring an update back to you in March. Again, that one's just requiring a bit of a deeper dive, and again, that interdisciplinary kind of approach, because we really need to hear the other lenses and what they're running into. I touched on this for expanding the in-person support. So again, if anyone needs to make an appointment, please reach out to our office. And then again, on the 21st of January is when we'll be starting that, those later hours until 5:30 p.m. Clear and predictable timelines. This is in the works as far as we already have established, and we've kind of started to lay it out, if you will, the statutory timeline requirements of what we have to adhere to. As we know, the reality of the situation is that those look a little different when you really, when it comes down to how long things are taking. So we're taking the statutory requirements and the timelines, and then we're also taking what we'll consider almost like an example timeline, if you will. Again, we're going to have a disclaimer on there that this is, subject to change, but just something that gives people, again, just a better indicator of, okay, if I'm looking at a demo, I can probably anticipate, again, making sure that they understand that something could change, but at least giving people just a little bit better of a understanding of what they can anticipate timeline-wise, depending on the type of project that they have underway. When we look at the 91 days to June 1st, a lot of this is what we've been working with innovation and technology on, and then of course communications, because all of this that we're doing, a big part of that is then communicating it out and working with our communications manager to make sure that we're telling the community what we're doing and being able to identify, again, how not only how they can tap into these resources, but if there's other things that we need to improve, that we have that two-way communication. So one of the big things, of course, is basically an overhaul of the website. We know that there's a lot of work to be done. We have started identifying, I'll call it the lower hanging fruit, if you will. So basically going through and anything that's outdated or needs to be removed, that's phase 1, and that's currently we have that list compiled. Certain things, of course, for statutory requirements have to stay up, but number 1 is cleaning it up, and then we're going to look at how do we make it a more dynamic site. And then again, it has a lot to do with community development, but we also want to make sure, as I'm sure you all know, that with the different pages, that something may be housed on another department's page, but it touches permitting, and we just want to make sure that from the user standpoint that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's, because we know that if they can get the information from the website, it's just gonna, that can really impact how many calls we get looking for that information. We are also looking and have been looking at our iWork platform, and one of the things that we're going to be looking at is issuing an RFP, again, to see if iWork, is the best software for us. There are a series of things that may come with that, whatever platform we go with, whether it's AI plan review, there's virtual inspections, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox, and so innovation and technology has really been helping us, again, be able to address the needs that we have, so that when we go to issue this RFP, we can really make an informed decision on what the best platform moving forward is for us. In the meantime, though, there are some kind of quick wins, and so we've been working with the business analysts through the Innovation and Technology Department to be able to identify, are there any things in the modules that we can do in iWork that can make things at least better now, because there are some, whether it's processing improvements or just the way that our technicians are doing things in the system. So we've been working with them. Again, we're not just waiting till the RFP and trying to improve them. So we're addressing those things in the interim, but our goal is to issue that RFP. And then I touched on the AI tools. That is something that on an individual level, certain team members have started to explore that, as they do plan review, but we do not have a software in place that's assisting with that. And so we're going to continue to work with innovation and technology to just evaluate those tools. And then again, hopefully be able to, if it's the right fit for us, be able to package that into the RFP once that goes out and it is issued. Next steps will be, we're going to be continuing to meet with, again, that internal cross-disciplinary working group team that I mentioned, and then we'll be coming back to you in March and June for additional updates, just to tell you where we're at in the process and what we've either learned or ran into, or if we think we need to pivot. But again, I just want to end with saying, thank you. It was a good exercise for me, because again, there were some really great suggestions in there, and once we started really documenting it, it's nice to see that we're already starting, or maybe had initiated some of these things, or maybe in a different form. And I just want to sincerely thank the building and permitting team in particular, because I know that they've been very diligent in just being able to adapt to any of these changes or anything that we're introducing to them. And so I'm just really excited to see where we go in the future. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Devin. Commissioner Robinson?
I thought too, another item that we were discussing as well, which would be more internally, was obsolete or functionally obsolete codes or ordinances that aren't seeming to work well with what we're doing with our rebuild process. I know that there's been some items that, of course, one of them was the sod bond. There's been other items that have come up, I think, with contractors and homeowners alike. And I believe your permitting or review board would also realize that there are some things that just keep coming up that just aren't working, that need to be looked at and reviewed and revised. So if we can cram that into the 91 days to June would be ideal. I would like to see something on that. And then are we going to get a report on those first 3 items that will be I think done by February?
Yes, when we come back in March, we'll be providing an update on those items.
Okay, so that'll be early March that we'll get that. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Marriott?
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate the update, and I do want to say that I know that I'm sure all of us, and I really appreciate the staff and the planning and the building department staff for being willing to be pushed and to be flexible, because I know that, for most people out there, the words government worker and flexible are not synonymous, and I think our staff has done a really good job in the aftermath of the storms, and then with all of these changes that we've been throwing at you guys for trying to improve the processes. And I really appreciate their willingness to come along with us. And so I think it's great, and I think there's some great progress that we're making and are going to continue to make. And I just had 2 comments. One is that along with the same-day permits, I don't want anyone to forget about keeping an eye out for anything that maybe we don't need to be issuing permits for, that we're currently requiring permits for, or things that we're requiring inspections for that don't need inspections. I know I had a fence inspected recently, and the inspector said, a lot of municipalities don't even have fences get inspected. He goes, I guess I'm just looking to make sure it's here. And so looking at things like that I think would be helpful. And then also just for everyone to really keep in the back of their mind what the purpose of the whole permitting process is, right? And the whole purpose is that things get built safely and to adhere to the Florida Building Code. And if we can find more efficient ways of doing that, the following of the exact rules is not the point. The coming up with a lot of hoops to make people jump through is not the point. The point is, do we have a process that allows people to build safely and effectively, and an inspection process that ensures that that's happening? And the rest of it is what do we do to get to that point? The rest of it shouldn't be the point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for the update, then. Sorry, Laura. Next, we have item 2C, presentation of historic height.
Good evening, Brandon Berry, planner. If we could pull up that presentation. So this is a follow-up to a discussion that occurred, I believe, at the last City Commission meeting. We also received a few questions from the District 4 Commissioner that I'll attempt to answer as we go along. This was published with your packets. I only have one additional slide. I'll point it out when we get to that point. So this focus has been, the research we've done up to this point has been on the current land development code that was adopted back in May of 2003 under Ordinance 2003-07. The city did have 3 former codes. None of them had a definition of height at the time of adoption. Ordinance 200 did have a definition adopted later on, but I'm going to be focusing on the current code that we are operating under and has been amended several times. So height, as defined at adoption back in 2003, was defined as the vertical distance above the required flood elevation to the highest point of a flat roof, to the deck of a mansard roof, or to the average height between the plate and ridge of gable or hip roofs, not including chimneys, antennas, elevator shafts, mechanical rooms, or other non-habitable areas. That definition was slightly tweaked in 2015 with an amendment that removed the word required and added in base flood elevation. I want to point out that required flood elevation isn't defined in our code. It's not defined in the building code or by FEMA. Base flood elevation, of course, is defined in all of those codes. So that gave an actual measurement distance from which to base height. In 2021, we amended the definition to our current definition. The amendments were largely pertaining to single-family development. They're largely irrelevant to the CRD 8th Avenue zoning that we'll be talking about tonight. One change that did affect the height of structures was that the definition or the term base flood elevation was updated to required design flood elevation. Currently, we adhere with the minimum state requirement, which is 1 foot above base flood. That effectively increased the height of buildings throughout the city by 1 foot. I will say, though, that in 2021, and I'll point this out on a forthcoming slide, we also adopted new flood maps because base flood and design flood elevations are dynamic to those flood maps. This actually, even with this additional foot, the height of the buildable height of buildings throughout the city decreased by 1 to 3 feet, depending on location. I'll point that out in an example in a future slide. So just as we have for the Community Redevelopment District along Gulf Boulevard and Blind Pass Road, we also have a special area plan for the 8th Avenue District. It was originally adopted back in 2008. It was significantly amended back in 2012, and that was the last major modification. It has 5 purposes, but really, based on staff's interpretation, that original purpose placed equal weight on redevelopment and new development. It wasn't just about promoting new development as you have in many community redevelopment districts. It was about coming up with redevelopment or retention or repair, restoration of buildings that meet the character of the existing district at the time that the special area plan was adopted. Even back then, many of these buildings were nearing a century old, at a century old, and of course many of them are still present and well beyond that at this point. We have seen post-storm that many of the property owners along 8th Avenue have taken the initiative to preserve their structures. They've renovated despite sustaining damage to the structures from the storms. They have been willing to restore them, keep them their original purpose, that mixed use, ground floor commercial and office with residential or lodging above. And we're very thankful to those owners who have committed and contributing to making 8th Avenue a historic avenue. So one of the questions that we received pertained to height in the Community Redevelopment District 8th Avenue specifically. And looking back at the special area plan, it was largely prepared based on discussions and workshops. The Planning Board and the Historic Board had several workshops back in 2006, 2007. The comp plan amendments were adopted in 2009. The zoning code amendments were adopted in 2011. Early discussion in the adopted 2009 special area plan referenced 40 feet above flood elevation and 3 functional stories as the maximum allowed. You can see that in the minutes from the May 2006 joint meeting between the Historic Preservation Board and Planning Boards, as well as in the special area plan that was adopted as an attachment to Ordinance 2009-11. That was by the City Commission in the summer of 2009 and the electors in November 2009. So the special area plan was amended with a rezoning of 701 Gulf Way in 2012. It struck that 40 feet above flood elevation height reference. I did want to point out the special area plan is not a regulatory document. It's not where you would look for height, setback, lot coverage standards. It's really a data analysis and history document. It gives that background. It doesn't regulate. Since the adoption of the CRD 8th Avenue zoning in 2011, the regulated height limit has been 35 feet above flood elevation. Again, it's really lined up with that definition of height as it's changed throughout the years. 35 feet above flood elevation is consistent with what the zoning of those properties were prior to the rezoning in 2011. The ROR PAG standards allowed for buildings of up to 35 feet. That is consistent with what was in place prior. CRD 8th Avenue has never had its own height definition. It wasn't a mistake that occurred at some point in time where the actual regulations were updated. I think there were questions that were posed by the board, and I'll get into that in the future, on whether the intent was really carried forward, but there was never a specific height definition that applied only to the 8th Avenue zoning. The definition in Division 2 that I read in earlier slides applies. There's never been a regulatory limit on the number of stories in the CRD 8th Avenue zoning district. There were definitely early discussions about having that 3 functional floor limit, but the regulatory limit has always been based on number of feet, not number of stories. Since 2003, the citywide definition of height has always included an exemption for non-habitable spaces above the roof line. Now, the examples that are given, that were lined out in that definition, they really pertain to what would be more considered casually non-occupiable space, mechanical decks, elevator shaft enclosures. Non-habitable is really much wider than that. It's much broader. It includes bathrooms, it includes stairs, it includes the actual elevator itself, spaces that are still occupiable, but not necessarily, they still fall into the non-habitable space definition under the Florida Building Code. I did want to point out that when 8th Avenue was rezoned to its own Community Redevelopment District 8th Avenue standards in 2011, it did lose the architectural overrun prohibition that applies to the properties when they were zoned ROR PAG. So in the Paso Grill Overlay District, we have a 32-foot height limit for single-family development. There is no overrun allowed above that height, no elevator shaft enclosures, mechanical space, anything like that. They all need to adhere with the 32-foot height limit. In the rezoning with the new regulations, that limitation was not carried forward. So we do have properties, we do have recent developments in the 8th Avenue zoning that do have non-habitable overruns above the maximum 35-foot height limit. So I did just want to point that out because that did somewhat affect the overall height of the building, even if it didn't affect the habitable height of the building as applied. So there have been 2 rezonings into the CRD 8th Avenue zoning district, not getting into the particulars of either one, but between 2011, when it was adopted, you can see that map on the top of the screen. The present is on the bottom. 701 Gulf Way was zoned from the ROR PAG district to CRD 8th Avenue in 2012. 702 Paso Grill Way was zoned the same in 2018. One of the questions that came up that was more direct in the email pertained to reversion of either land use or zoning. Future land use map amendments and rezonings rarely carry riders or limitation on future use of the property. You tend to see those in what we call planned unit developments, or our city calls them planned development districts. About 20 years ago, for example, the Dolphin Village Shopping Center had that zoning, and that's where it's a very finely tuned zoning to that particular property. They may be in effect for 20, 30 years. They may fulfill their purpose and then go away. With those more types of exotic zoning schemes, you may see a reversion or you may see a dissolution of that zoning. That's not the case typically with standard zoning. Once a property is rezoned or have its land use amended, it doesn't typically revert back unless the property owner or the city were to initiate that. Absent covenant, plat restrictions, or otherwise, a property owner can develop a permitted use subject to the applicable zoning standards and site constraints. Municipalities must always consider the full range of uses and highest permitted intensity, density, and most permissive dimensional standards allowed in the zoning district when a property is being rezoned. It's not necessarily based on what's intended at that time. We always need to consider what is practical to develop on that site. Commissions do have very wide latitude to decide on rezoning requests if their decisions are supported by competent and substantial evidence. So looking at an example along 8th Avenue, applying the height standard, height has been restricted to 35 feet above minimum flood elevation as that definition has changed for all uses in the 8th Avenue zoning since the district was created in 2011. The measurement basis in the definition of height did change from required to base in 2015, but staff finds that of developments that we've looked at prior to that date, height has generally been measured from base flood elevation. I'm not aware of any developments between 2003 and 2015 where there was commercial, the ground floor flood proofed, and then a maximum height structure above. I don't believe we've had any of those, so it's hard to really verify that that's exactly how it was applied. But looking back at site plans and building plans, it does appear that base flood was interpreted to mean required flood elevation. As of 2021, as I pointed out before, the height definition has increased by 1 foot across the board. We still use the same basis of measurement, it's just moved up 1 foot. But as I mentioned before, in 2021, the FEMA flood maps were also amended to coincide with that definition change, and that did decrease flood heights, the 100-year flood height in many areas of the city by 1 to 3 feet, which reduces the height of those buildings by 0 to 2 feet when measured from grade in a practical sense. And I'll use 109 8th Avenue, the Berkeley Beach Club, that was built in 2017. So that was post-amendment of that definition to be measured from base flood elevation, but it was pre-adoption of our current flood maps. We were still under the 2003 flood maps at the time. At the time they built to the height limit, the top of the bar roof is at 35 feet above what was then the base flood elevation, which was 12 feet NAVD 88. Since then, their base flood elevation has dropped to 9 feet, AE 9 from AE 12. We have increased height by 1 foot to account for that freeboard requirement, but if this structure were built today, it would be 2 feet shorter than it's actually built based on the flood maps and based on the definition that was in place back in 2017 when it was built. So again, the flood maps being dynamic as they change over time, that basis of measurement is going to change with it as well. So this is really just based on staff input. I've been working with the city since 2018. I have reviewed many of the developments, single family up through commercial development during that period of time. The interpretation of the application of the term height has not significantly changed since staff began reviewing permits in 2018, except to account for that definitional change, which has affected single family a lot more than commercial and multifamily and mixed use. Height is now base flood elevation plus 1 foot to the highest point of the roof, and the additional foot of height permitted was offset by reductions in base flood elevation of 1 to 3 feet across 8th Avenue and really in other areas of the city as well. Anecdotally, staff has noticed that there has been an increase in new structures built at or near the maximum height permitted. You can see in the table on the right side of the screen, those are the last 20 issued new residential home permits. Of those 20, 45% have been built within 3 feet of the height limit. 40% have been built with 35 feet or more on average above grade, and that accounts for that base flood elevation difference. Again, this is anecdotal. I don't have the data to share on this slide, but we are seeing homes being built taller. We're seeing more 3-story structures. We're also seeing more structures with rooftop decks, both commercial and residential, than we used to see in the past. Skip that. That was requested to be skipped. We did take this item as a discussion, not the presentation, but just the discussion generally to our historic board last Thursday. We got some great feedback from them, and this has been an ongoing conversation with our board for several years now, dating back to 2021. I know we've been having similar discussions, and I think we've all learned a lot as we move forward on both project and code amendments. So their main 3 points, and I think that the highest point is really the first one, is that their perception is that the measurement of allowable height has changed unintentionally to be taken from base flood elevation instead of grade and passer grill. Their understanding is that 35 feet was intended to be the from grade limit on 8th Avenue. So at some point in time, it might have just been something that was lost in in the ordinance amendments that were made over time, not necessarily something that was left out of an ordinance. It wasn't an error, just the intent was lost over time, that 8th Avenue was supposed to have a 35-foot from grade height limitation. Their second major point is that 8th Avenue development should not exceed 35 feet above grade because it can be built at grade and flood proofed, unlike residential. Residential, of course, cannot be flood proofed. It needs to be elevated to that design flood elevation. Commercial mixed use can be flood proofed in most cases. We do have pending amendments. You may remember these from the amendments that we brought forward at the beginning of last year that would partially resolve this. Any building that could be built at grade that is flood proof to provide that mixed use commercial would be measured from 35 feet above grade. Of course, we have Senate Bill 180. We have other considerations that we're working through on those amendments, but that was the intent of the Historic Board with the new updates to provide for those limitations. The third point, and that this has really just come up more recently, and I thought it was a great suggestion, when design review cases move forward, they need to accurately reflect the mass, the scale, the height of buildings in the vicinity of that development. They've perceived that renderings that have been shared with them recently are not accurately reflecting the height and the massing and scale of buildings surrounding them. It makes them look more contextual than they feel that they actually will be once constructed. That was a recommendation that these renderings be prepared and use actual city data showing the height and massing of buildings. We have one last slide that I'll hand over to the city attorney for.
I think we were looking here at what are the legal implications. So because of three things, we really have the Senate Bill 180, where we can't adopt anything more burdensome or restrictive as a requirement or a procedure until October 1st of 2027, unless that date is made earlier in legislation in Tallahassee between now and then. We also have to worry about the Burt-Harris Act. The Burt-Harris Act awards damages for a mere diminution in value that's reflected in an appraised value of property. So if we were to say you could only build half of what you could build before, that might affect the square footage of a commercial structure or a lodging establishment. That could impact the valuation conducted by an appraiser, so we would have to take a look at that if we were to do amendments after Senate Bill 180 expires. We still have that Burt-Harris concern. And then, of course, you always have the Fifth Amendment in the Constitution, which is takings of private property through regulatory. Those are easier to get beyond because as long as you have some residual reasonable economic value left in the property, there's no taking. And then the 14th Amendment is what they call a substantive due process taking. There has to be a rational basis for any rule that you adopt. But the courts will apply a fairly liberal test that say any rational basis is fine. Anything you can articulate, they will uphold. So right now, our strictest one is at the top, Senate Bill 180. Once that's removed, then our next most restrictive is the Burt-Harris Act. We need to make sure we're not impacting the appraised value of property by what we do. It doesn't say that you can't do it. It's just that if you do it, you have to pay the property owner the difference in value. So it's a damage award. So meanwhile, I think we're looking at the code as written. We don't want to make any written amendments while Senate Bill 180 is being applied. We don't want to make any written interpretations that would be different from what's in the code. We're stuck with what's in our code as it's written to be applied. So I think this was very helpful to explain the history of, Brandon, could you go back to the previous slide? The history, I think. So the first bullet point was the perception was there, but the perception, I think, was not correct based on our research. You've seen how the definition of height has changed from base flood to design flood, and you've seen how the flood maps have actually gone down, which changes the overall actual height of the buildings. And there's some history that Brandon's pulled up with regard to the debates and the special area plans. But what's in our code is what's in our code now. If we're going to make the pending amendments in the second bullet point, we need to wait till after Senate Bill 180, and then we'll need to do an analysis to see if we implicate Burt Harris valuations on properties. And then the third bullet point, that simply can be implemented as we take applications and review renderings of projects. That's not a new criteria or a new design, it's just making sure that the accuracy of photographic, photometric renderings take into account all the things that Brandon has been talking about when they say a building is 37 feet. We need to figure out and make sure that the photo rendering is accurately using the flood maps that were implicated at the time and then implicated now. So it's complicated even for those presentations, but those certainly should be made more accurate. And that's allowable under Senate Bill 180 and Burt Harris and the Constitution to implement that bullet point 3. We don't need any written clarification on that. That can be done by staff.
And I will just say, as I mentioned before, we have been discussing issues like this with our historic board for several years. They're all very knowledgeable about our code, and many of them have history long beyond any time that I've spent with the city. So I think even though the technical changes don't bear out with that change in height, I do think that maybe, I think their concern is more that the intent was lost, less so than what was actually adopted in the code. Those early discussions, is that something that's really been carried forward? That was what they expressed to me last Thursday. So with that, those are all of our slides. Happy to take questions if you have any.
Commissioner Robinson?
I have a question regarding number 3 on this Historic Preservation Board Input 1-8 meeting. Shouldn't that apply citywide, not just to 8th Avenue?
Certainly, that makes sense. It makes sense to have accurate renderings showing surrounding buildings.
Because we haven't had that. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we're going to do it, we should do it citywide and not just for 8th Avenue.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. And then overall, how similar is our CRD 8th Avenue to CRD Town Center? We haven't even touched on that because we have a CRD for Town Center as well.
Right.
Maybe we can do another presentation on that to find out the differences between those.
Sure.
Because if we're going to touch on this topic, we might as well touch on the whole thing. And then third, habitable. Do we have a definition of that, or is that a state definition? How do we define that? I mean, we're looking at a whole, I could sleep on my roof deck, my rooftop.
Habitable is defined in the Florida Building Code, so that's typically the definition we use. The American Planning Association also publishes a dictionary that we use for guidance on that. Our local code does not include a definition, and I did speak with the city attorney about this earlier. Coming up with the definition under Senate Bill 180 that's more restrictive is not a loophole for things like that. But in the future, it's something we can certainly look into.
Okay, yeah, that is becoming more of a item that's coming up. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And thank you for the research on that.
In the definition of height at the very end, there is a section that kind of indicates what habitable or non-habitable would be. It says, this measurement shall not be inclusive of elevator shafts, chimneys, mechanical rooms, or other non-habitable areas, implying something is similar to one of those: shafts, chimneys, mechanical rooms, or other non-habitable areas.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.
Next, we have general audience comments. City Clerk.
Joe Smith.
Before I get to that, I was under understanding that I could be involved in the presentation. That was approved by the commission.
Did we have anything on that? Or I don't have any objections.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I don't have any objections.
Yeah, I just want to.
You have to come to the podium, though, and just make, yeah.
Bill Robert, 2405 Pass-a-Girl Way. And first, a big thank you to both Brandon and Kristen. They did a really good job pulling a lot of this stuff out of the mist of time. But one thing I think we need to And I met with him yesterday and spent maybe 90 minutes and went through all the stuff that we had talked about that's part of the presentation that was made. And I don't know if you all have read the whatever 120 pages or so that has been put into this, but I think I can say without the argument that it was very clear what the initial intent was for 8th Avenue, and not just 35 feet or things of that nature, but it was to preserve what was there. They were very concerned about height. The real reason for the CRD being developed was because it was zoned ROR, and under ROR, you couldn't build anything that exists on 8th Avenue, up the sidewalks, covered sidewalks, things of that nature. So the clear intent was to preserve that, preserve scale, preserve the architectural aesthetic. Height was an issue. But if you read all of those design area plans, which I know are not regulatory, but that showed the consensus of what the citizens were all thinking of the time, it went from preserving the way it was. It went from talking about, let's say, a 30-foot with a 10-foot flood elevation, so a 40-foot structure. They always talked about maximum of 3 stories. They wanted a commercial floor, which would limit the height. And those are all the intents that were carried out in 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009. If you look at the ordinance, they all kind of back that up. Now, and I've talked to Brandon about this, and I think he's going to get me some of this information, but there seemed to be a shift. There's like a 2-year time frame between these design plans and these feelings of what I just expressed, that when they created Division 40, which was the manifestation of the CRD, everything changed. And I haven't seen anything that talks, and I'm sure it's probably out there, but what changed the intent? It went from, I think the wording is, they always said the purpose was to preserve and promote the continuance of the existing developmental pattern and architectural aesthetic. And then, when they created after years of saying that same thing, suddenly when Division 40 came in, it said intended to encourage and promote. What happened to the preservation part of it? And I made a joke. I said, I guess we should be the Historic Encouragement Board, because all these things are there, that's the... And how did that change? What were the discussions that occurred where because I haven't seen that, and none of us were around there, and I'd love to be able to see where that was. Is it a Scrivener's error? Did they mean to put preserve and they put encourage instead? I don't know, because I'd love to see what that has to say. And I think it's important to most of the citizens, because every single person that I've talked to, for example, when they built the Berkeley, they said, how did they build it that high? It was supposed to all be lower. And, now, after, from this presentation and stuff, the Berkeley could have been a whole story higher. It could have been 4, they could have, that upper deck or that rooftop could have been a whole other story, the way it's interpreted now. So how do we go from people sitting around on the street in 2006 and looking at the buildings and saying we want to keep this existing thing to now be able to build essentially 4 stories, when every single structure on 8th Avenue was 2 stories, with the exception of the back of the hotel, which was just 3 stories along the alley, but I think it was 35 feet was the max. So that's why people thought, well, 35 feet, that must be from above grade, because then you could build everything here and even have more room, to build a 3rd story, and we should have this for a 3rd story. So everyone thought, well, the 35 feet must mean from above grade. And if you look at the way the height definition is, in every division, it's the same thing how they say the height should be measured. In the CRD, it just says nothing shall be higher than 35 feet. So I think the question was that an intent? Was it supposed to be above grade? And I think in looking through this, you can see that, no, they really were talking about 40 feet. They were talking about base flood elevation. However, if they had said above grade, would we have any issues here? No. If they had said max of 3 stories, would we have had any issues here? No. But I would like to be able to see what it was that made things change, because all that stuff went out the door and it doesn't seem to be any, I don't know why. And so, nor do I believe the citizens, and I see some of you all nodding your heads, I think you all believe the same thing. So, you know, they did a great job. We pulled some stuff out. There's more minutes, I think, that out there that aren't presented in these packets and things, and I'd just love to see, to make just sure, because when you talk about the reason for the CRD, it was entirely frustrated. The reason for it was entirely frustrated if you can now build a 4-story building right there. And so it was like, what were we doing all that time frame? Why did we spend all this money, do these special area plans and all things of this just to do nothing? And so I think there's been some talk about maybe potentially having a workshop about building heights, because when I look at this stuff, I also find other things that are going to be problems potentially in the future in other areas of the city besides the CRD. Because the reality is, a lot of these heights were set many, many years ago. They've been changed over time and been added to, and there hasn't been a lot of development in St. Pete Beach. I mean, maybe the big hotels, but the little smaller places, I mean, you're talking about locations that today could be built twice as big as they were years ago. And of course, years ago, property values were less. People didn't build the absolute max every time. And that's what we're seeing. And talk about what Commissioner Robbins said about habitable. I mean, we're getting structures now where there's an entire 4th floor, essentially. And I guess all you got to say is, well, I'm not living there, or there's no bathroom. And, you know, when you say a chimney, that's not a fireplace, it's a chimney. It's for what's below the maximum height. When you say an elevator shaft, it's not an elevator, it's an elevator shaft for the elevator that goes below maximum height. And so we've been misinterpreting that, and we always talk about height, but especially in some of the, you know, residential areas, we're just allowing this misinterpretation, I believe. And to go back to what Attorney Brooks said about, you know, the special, or Senate Bill 180. I'm not asking, or I don't think there's a question here about making amendments to these things. It's the interpretation of what already exists. And so I just point that out as we go forward. I don't think there's a requirement. I mean, I think you all could say, interpret what rooftop accessories mean, for example, just like I think you could interpret ultimately what the intent here is. I understand that, as Attorney Brooks said, I think those are his words he said, we're stuck with the codes. And I appreciate that, and that's exactly what happened. We got stuck. And it was, whether it was based on sloppy work or lack of attention, I don't know. But I really would ask that staff continue with me a little bit to get some of this information about happening in that 2-year period between this was our intent to putting it in Division 40 where all those things no longer existed. So with that, I appreciate you letting me be involved as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowry.
And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them if you have any for me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, we are now moving on to general audience comments.
I've got a couple comments to make on this subject.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I was just waiting on Mr. Lowry to get up and speak. So, first of all, thank you to the staff. I mean, the deep dive that you were able to come up with, so much data, is extremely impressive. But I felt like I sat through a calculus class. You know, I thought this was a complicated issue going in. I had some questions, and now I've realized that we're not going to solve this tonight. I do think that one of the expectations I would have tonight, and with the commission's endorsement and support, is that possibly workshop to incorporate the items that were just brought into the fold. But I would say that my position mirrors what the Historical Preservation Board their observations and their interpretations are what I've been advocating and saying since day one, that there has been a misinterpretation of height, and I'm not seeking to change anything. So you speak of Senate Bill 180, Harrisburg, and the 5th and the 14th Amendment, and things like that. So quick question for council, is there a precedence where a municipality or city has operated under an interpretation and then changed that? Are you aware of anything like that?
Obviously, that can happen. There's no interpretation of Senate Bill 180 in terms of interpretations. Senate Bill 180 talks about amendments to the Land Development Code, amendments to the Comprehensive Plan. So, that's what we want to be mindful of. As applications come forward, they'll be analyzed on their merits. It seems that the roof space, if non-habitable, can be there, but shouldn't be used for habitable purposes.
But perhaps I misstated or was not understood. Are there any case laws that you're familiar with where a municipality or a city has operated with an understanding of their interpretation and then later that was challenged? Or
there's a case, Hemisphere Equity versus Monroe County, where the District Court of Appeals said if there was an incorrect interpretation of a code, it can be changed, but they're not changing the words of the code. I think that's what you're asking.
Thank you. Yes. So that's where I'm trying to get with this, and to just reaffirm what my position is from the very beginning is that I just want to apply what is in existence, but I would like this current commission to weigh in with an interpretation, given the fact that staff has, done an incredible job of finding things for us, but we don't know what the intent was. I don't think we're going to find that, but circumstances have changed, and there was a mention of, how the CRD first came into existence, and I don't find any practical reason or application why BFE should be applied in the CRD when the first floor is commercial. That's one of the things that I struggled with. And then I look at the intent, the intent of the, let's see here, the special City of St. Pete Beach 8th Avenue Commercial District Special Area Plan 2008 amended in 2011. It talks about the goal, and this is in page 99 of our packet, to establish standards that are meaningful to this district, taking into account the existing conditions in the limited lot sizes. It goes on to say on page 112 of our packet, the CRDEA district will not create any significant impact on the city's overall systems, capacities, water, sewer, stormwater, or impact the respective and adopted levels of service. So I think that those two things have changed a little bit in terms of impact in today's realities, especially when you're talking about inflow and infrastructure issues, capacity, density. All these things were not first and foremost present to the commission in 2008 and 2011 as they are today. So all that to say that what I'm looking for today is not an agreement and interpretation, but I would like to have a workshop where we can further discuss this without rushing through things, without violating, due process, Senate Bill 180, and things like that. But now we do know that there is case law out there where this has happened. People have made mistakes when it comes to codes, and they've admitted to that. And there's no fault or no penalty to anyone. Again, the staff is doing an incredible job here. And I praise them, and I really appreciate all of the efforts that went to just having this discussion, because it's not an easy discussion. And this is something that will continue to come up, as Mr. Lowry said, not only in our historic district, but throughout St. Pete Beach. And if we don't get ahead of it now, then we're going to really suffer the consequences in years to come. So with that, thank you.
Commissioner Marriott.
Sure. So Commissioner Maldonado, I'm totally open to having a workshop to further discuss the issue. I think it probably sounds like it may be warranted, particularly specifically related to the 8th Avenue CRD. I do have very strong misgivings in reinterpreting our height citywide to from grade versus from design flood or base flood, because that will not do anything to help anybody who's trying to rebuild from the hurricane get a building permit or get a house built or get back in their houses. What it will do is it will require that everybody who's got a project underway to redesign it, because none of them will fit under grade. I'm going to be having a one-story house built that would barely fit at 35 feet above grade. And so I think we want to be very careful about taking on some project that all of a sudden is going to throw every building permit that's been issued for a new build in the last 8 months and every one that's going to get issued in the next 2 years into a redesign phase. So I have no desire to go down that road. But if you want to discuss how it relates to the 8th Avenue district and if it's possible for us to interpret it differently in that district legally, that's a discussion I'm willing to have.
Commissioner Robinson?
Brandon, on the CRDs, or special area planning as it originally was called, primarily commercial, correct? Primary commercial / transient, correct?
Correct, mixed use.
So there was no residential in that. So with that being said, with I think going with what Commissioner Maldonado is getting to, I think, and back to intent, I think we have a missing link here, 2 years somewhere, 2009, 2011, something like that. And I think if you look back too as well on the changes with the town center as well, I think you'll find that those go hand in hand. So it's worth looking at on citywide. I'm sorry, I would disagree. I think it's worth looking at citywide to see where this was. Intent is extremely important, as anybody sitting in this or listening knows, and especially if you're an attorney. Intent is extremely important. And when we whitewash stuff out of our comp plan, and we change stuff out of our comp plan to change the intent or soften it, there's a problem. And there appears to also be that during our 2007 to 2024 on the Green Mission Statement and community planning. That has been whitewashed away out of our comp plan. So intent is extremely important, and I would appreciate finding out what that intent was. It's citywide. And I think anything that we're talking about, whether we're looking at it in one district or another, I think it should be looked at on a citywide level. I don't think particularly one district deserves special attention than another. Thank you.
Commissioner Reznicki?
Yes, I just wanted to say, and I agree with Commissioner Robinson about the intent, because there's a lot of things in the city that is lost because it was intended, but the interpretation later was changed, not by the original intention. And I just wanted to mention something because I know we're looking for this gap, and I can't remember, and this might be a question to you, Brendan, if you remember. I don't know if you were around, but when the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, and the ranking and the number, and I remember coming to commission meetings, listening about the base flood elevation and all that. At that time, could have that been the point or something involved in changing what we thought was ground, to 35 feet, but now we're looking at base flood freeboard? I remember all those lengthy, confusing conversations that were going on here because it was mentioned. I remember seeing pictures of houses, so we were even looking at residential back then too, because the houses were going to be taller than the neighbors, and whether the water now is going to be going into the neighbor's house, and how are we going to retain stormwater, and it just went on and on and on, but knowing that it was going to change the look of many of the residential homes too, or neighborhoods, let's say, whether historic or not, was that part of it as well?
So on the single-family side, those height definition changes back in 2021 were primarily focused on those homes, and that was to allow for outside of Paso Grill, anyone to be able to build a home of the same height, regardless of where you are in the city. It gives an alternative to design flood as the basis for height. It moves it up to 8 feet above natural grade. So that would be prior to fill. If someone brought in 3 feet of fill, they would lose 3 feet in buildable height. It doesn't account for that. But that was largely only applied to single family. That was the focus at the time because of the development we were seeing at the time. In terms of commercial development, it really was just that 1 foot change. And of course, that was counteracted in a lot of cases, like I pointed out on 8th Avenue, by the flood maps going down a few feet in height. We did, of course, have properties that were moved into velocity zones or coastal A zones that have other requirements for elevation that weren't necessarily applicable before. But the focus was on single family at the time, and that was the most significant change.
But even in the 8th Avenue, I mean, like you gave the Berkeley example, you know, like if they were to build today, or if they had to, let's say if it, whatever, it would be lower.
Correct, yes.
But if the FEMA maps change again, then maybe it could be 5 feet higher.
That's
right?
true, correct. And we have
So,
had...
I mean, it's like we're basing it off of a changing a flood map.
That's correct,
versus what
true.
the aesthetic look of what the district is looking for, right? Like, when I hear Mr. Lowry speaking, you're talking about people who were sitting around way before these flood maps, right? Looking at what it would look like, not thinking that 20 years from now or 15 or 10, the flood maps are going to dictate really the height of what the intention was. So, and I don't know if that helps legally, like, again, the intention, back then we weren't looking at that, and I wasn't there obviously, but, what they were looking at when the groups of people were meeting to talk about that look, of what they wanted to preserve. So, anyways, thank you.
And I think going back and finding those minutes, looking at what really happened in that period, because as you pointed out, that was when we were working through some of the CRD standards. So,
And again, if we're talking commercial, we're talking a different animal here, because we're talking the ability to flood proof, whereas residential doesn't have that ability. So there's definitely a difference. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
Just got one more comment.
Yes, sir.
So hearing Commissioner Robinson voice her concern, this is a question. Could this commission at this point decide what they interpret the maximum height in the 8th Avenue CRD to be?
Well, right now, the CRD 8th Avenue says 35 feet in height, and then because it's not defined there, you go to the definition section 2.1, and you'll want to study that 2.1 definition of height in the Land Development Code, and that's like what I said earlier, you're stuck with that. So as particular applications come forward, or appeals come forward, or conditional use applications come forward, that's when you'll look at that section, that 2.1 definition on the left-hand side of the table, and apply it to what's on the right-hand side of the table that's being applied for, to see if you think that that meets the definition on the left-hand side of the table. So you're stuck with that, and you should do it on an ad hoc basis rather than writing a written interpretation or policy, which could be construed as an amendment. That's action. So you'll want to just use this code and compare this code to what's coming before you each time.
And the reason I ask that is to Commissioner Reznicki's point about these flood maps and Brandon's comments being dynamic. This is going to change. And what I don't want to do is exactly what Commissioner Robinson said, is somehow unintentionally cause a secondary or tertiary effect where we're impacting residents' abilities to rebuild and get back into their homes.
You'll note in the height definition, they have 1, 2, and 3, and then 1 is for the residentials, and then 2 is for accessories, and then 3 is for all other structures. So I'll be looking at, and then before I forget, I think it was Reznicki, you mentioned the CRS ratings. So you get additional points by going +1, +2, +3. You can get additional points in the CRS system. So sometimes cities will add points by raising the design flood elevation.
That discussion.
And it may be inadvertently, you need to think about when you're doing that, are you going to be altering heights, and is that something that you want to do to get those points or not?
And I remember those meetings where specifically for that, the points. They're looking to improve in points.
I think everyone has to do +1 right now, and we have +1, but some cities do go +2, +3, but that could impact your height, overall height, the way it's defined here.
So, I don't really have clear direction based on Commissioner Maldonado's request. So I would just like to hear if I have 3 that want a workshop.
Well, so
City-
I kind of am pausing and thinking about that based on what council just said. If we can somehow have a process where they're looked at ad hoc, using existing
That's what you're going to have to do because of Senate Bill 1.
doctrine, I mean, is there even the necessity? Just that once a build plan comes up and the discussion talks about height, is there an ability at that point to make sure that it's in bounds? I mean, put up guardrails essentially.
I think tonight was very helpful because we've explained the definition publicly in the history, and you can always go back and research some more, look at more minutes, and those will all possibly be relevant in your future deliberations. But it's important that you apply the code as it's written to individual applications and quasi-judicial hearings and context as they come up. Now all of you are much more better educated in the history of the height and how it's changed and how the maps have impacted. So I think that'll lead to better decision-making as you're looking at these applications in the future.
Do we need another workshop, or do we need an updated presentation once we've dug a little bit more into the history?
Well,
I guess I would like to understand your use of the word ad hoc, because the way approvals happen in the city,
Case by case, I think, is a better word.
on whether they even go to any deciding board, whether they come to the commission or not. There's a whole process behind that, so I just don't want to misread your ad hoc.
so let me clarify. So what I'm getting at here is that, yes, case-by-case basis with the understanding from this commission what we interpret the maximum height to be.
So you want to provide a new interpretation to staff?
Not
No.
a new, no.
I think
no.
he's just saying that as the cases come up in the future, on a case-by-case basis, they'll apply the definitions as they come up. And so we don't want a written interpretation under Senate Bill 180. We're going to have to consider these as they come through, whatever process individual applications may come through. Some may come as administrative appeals, some may come as conditional use, seeking.
Yeah, well,
But how is that different than what's happening now?
So
It's not. I think that's what's happening now, and it will continue to happen. Whoever's sitting at the city commission, if an application gets to city commission, the majority will interpret what's on the plan on the right and say, does that meet the criteria that's in the code on the left?
Okay, so to answer both questions, the mayor's and yours, in not a workshop, but a second presentation, just to get the additional information that Chair Lowry was inquiring about, so that we can synthesize the intent. It's the intent piece that we're hanging out on. So this change in 2009, 2011, with the creation of Division 40, he talked about something there that I think is crucial, and it's the change from preserve and promote to encourage. And everything that I've read, the documents are provided by the staff, that is the missing piece. And I think that transition, those 2 years, that's when we lost something. So if we can just dig down that one piece, I don't want to burden staff, I don't want to create another heavy lift on them. Just focus in on that one piece with the Historic Preservation Board's input, and then I think that we can decide if anything needs to go further and beyond that.
Okay. Do I have I need 3 head nods, and then timeline, is there an urgency to this, or you fit it into normal operations?
Before the next one of these comes up?
I don't know that that's possible. But,
Okay, I'll look at my crystal ball and we'll figure it out.
It's not urgent. We've had the discussion. I think some of the items that'll be discussed later will help the boards and committees that are impacted by these decisions to seek expert staff is available. And if hopefully they'll look at this meeting and they'll make their own analysis based on the discussions that we've had here. I mean, this is the purpose of having these discussions, correct? But we sat here for an hour prior, and what we don't want to do is overburden the staff, create new work for the sake of work. But I think that one piece is going to be crucial. So again, you know, my first comment was thank you to the staff for the deep dive. If we could just neck down that 2009 to 2011, and this is really about manuscripts. It's not about interpretation. We need to see what they were thinking, and then we can put this either to rest or move forward. But thank you for indulging me and for hearing this part out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Third time is the charm. Clerk, do we have any general audience? Commissioner Maldonado, one last.
There's a card.
Please,
Joe Smith.
if you please state your name and address for the record.
Joe Smith, 1825 Main Street in Weston, Florida. I'd like to use the 3 minutes for my colleague, Scott, who's here as well. He's representing Tradewinds along with me. Scott Robbins, our general manager.
I'm sorry, sir, we do not allow for additional time unless you have a group of at least 4 or more.
Okay, well, I'll try and fit this in, then I'll write you a letter and as a follow-up.
Thank you, sir.
Number one, I have serious concerns about the ordinances that are being proposed, you know, in particular the beach, the noise, I don't even know what they're all called, you know, there's so many of them. But the lighting, there's such general definition around lighting, where the lighting can be seen from, what angle, where it's coming from. My real concern is it seems to also incorporate special event permits. That's a serious problem for us. We obviously have the Country Thunder music concert coming up. We've been working well with the city staff. There hasn't been any issues, but if an ordinance like this were to be passed, there'd be significant damages, right? I mean, it'd be massive. Job loss, tax revenue, dollars lost for the whole community, not just Tradewinds. So major issue for us. Number two is in the ordinance, it seems to either prohibit fireworks or now there's discussion about it being from a barge. Just so you know, a barge is 400% to 500% more expensive. That might stop us from doing or applying for special permits to do fireworks. I know the community enjoys those fireworks on 4th of July or Memorial Day or different holidays. It would be a shame if we couldn't do that. I think if we can work under a special permit, you know, where we're setting up fireworks, we're cleaning up afterwards, we're working with turtle people to make sure there's no nests around, we're roping off the area. There's really no reason why we can't do that. I think when we start to do things like this, we're killing the culture of St. Pete Beach, and it's a real shame to me. So that's an issue. There's also language about no campfires, fire pits. I think immediately s'mores. I think a lot of people love to come over and have their s'mores at Tradewinds. You know, again, under a special permit, I don't see why that can't be done. Fireworks, I agree, there shouldn't be individuals firing bottle rockets at each other. I get it. But, you know, under special permits, under working with the city, I don't see why these things can't be done. The bridge toll, I think, is a horrible idea. You know, if you want to see the cost of your landscaper, plumber, all your trades go up, or people stop saying, or start saying, I just don't want to come down to the beach anymore. In fact, there's an island where this has already happened. It's called Manhattan. And it's, people don't want to work in Manhattan because the bridge tolls, because of parking tickets. The more legislation you put, you know, think about extended family, your daughter, your son comes in to visit you. They're going to get charged these tolls. And then how do you get that unwound off of your bill? Or is there a big line of people queuing up? I mean, this is just really going to affect the residents as much or more than the hotel guests. Think about it. A hotel guest comes in once, they sit on the beach for a week, and then they leave. That's one bridge trip. Your service providers are coming over every day. Your family's coming over the time, you're coming over the time, you might have a new car, it may not get read the right way. This bridge toll is horrible for restaurants too. It's like parking. The second you charge for parking for a restaurant,
Thank you,
that
sir.
restaurant gets killed. So I'll follow up with a letter. Thanks for your time.
Any comments? City Clerk?
Jackie Hubbard.
If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Jackie Hubbard, 1240 Boca Ciega Isle Drive. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, first I want to thank all of you, commissioners, mayor, city staff, city attorney, just for dedicating your time to our city and making this place a great place to live. The main thing that I want to get across today is a sense of gratitude. St. Pete Beach is a great place to be for the holidays, and all of our events this year that I attended were fantastic and memorable for kids. I know my husband stood up previously about the tree lighting ceremony, which I enjoyed so much, and I want to echo everything that he said. It sounds like I was offered up for some volunteering to help with that, and I'm happy to help with any family activities that the city has if you need a resident volunteer. What drove me to stand up today at this particular meeting is I wanted to talk about the Santas and the Santa and Sirens event that you guys ran. Christmas looked a little different for us because our daughter's school closed at St. John Vianney, so some of the events, were different this year. And our island, we usually do the luminaries along the street, and we didn't do them this year. So it was really special that the Santa and Sirens event happened. We loved it. It was so fun and spirited. We loved the tracker, so we hope that the fire department keeps the GPS tracker going. That was really cool because we knew when they were getting close and we could go outside, and they were really loud this year. To me, I don't know, it seemed like it was bigger this year. It was louder this year. They had a fire truck, lots of fire department vehicles, SUVs, multiple sheriff vehicles, so much noise. It was great. So I want to take time to thank the fire department for bringing the Christmas spirit to our island and our home. This is also not the first time we've had a memorable experience with the fire department. We had lightning strike our palm tree. I came up and talked then, but we thanked them. They were great. They came, they put the fire out of the palm tree, and it was awesome. I'd also like to thank the Sheriff's Department, too, for being a part of it. They had a lot of lights and sirens, and it was great. I also want to say that I admire how involved that both departments are, and that the Sheriff's Department in our community and all the children's events, they had a trunk at the Corey Avenue trunk or treat, and they were great and friendly, and they posed for pictures, and they also responded very quickly. We had to call them when we were out of town, and there was a suspicious person on our cameras, and they came within 3 minutes. So my daughter made some thank you cards for the fire department and the sheriff's office, and we're so lucky to have them, and thank you from our whole family. Thanks for keeping us safe, and thanks for keeping this Christmas spirit and traditions alive here on the beach. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Lynn Walker.
Good evening. If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Lynn Walker. My home is at 209 Gulf Way, and I'm one of the unfortunates still not back in that home. Although I've been diligently working, and some of you may remember seeing me at hearings both in 2024 and in 2025, not before the commission, but before the historic board. And I just cannot say enough good things about the staff and how diligently they work, and Brandon and his team are fabulous. We are very blessed. And I want to thank all of you all, because I know it is an act of service to do these jobs. It is hard and it takes a lot of time. So thank you very much for being here and doing it. I've been very interested in what I've heard today, and I have many comments about many things, but the first thing I want to mention is our beaches, our dunes, our lack of a seawall or any sort of protection south of 7th. We are really in dire straits. We did not get any kind of temporary help until late October, I believe. Really, it was almost the end of hurricane season. We have no assurance we're going to get real seawalls before the next one starts. We don't even have stakes with ropes across them. We have nothing that is holding that stand back, and we don't have signage. And this is a city that I have watched for 26 years put up signs at a drop of a hat. We have no signage. We have people trampling our dunes. I understand you have many, many, many priorities and things to think about, but if we ruin our beaches, our most natural, valuable resource that brings people here to stay in the hotels, to eat in the restaurants, we have nothing. the historic value of Pass-a-Grille, and there has been an overlay there for a long, long time, and we still think of it as a little bit different than the rest of St. Pete Beach. It's a residential community, it always has been, that has changed some. A lot of the decisions you have to make coming up could change it even vastly more. The height limitation is of great concern to the residents. Those of us who are still in 20s to 50s bungalows are now in canyons, are expecting to be when these huge structures go up all around us. How are we going to be protected from water? Where's the permeable ground going to go? And in addition, we have no protection from the elements right now in general. So I just plead with you to keep that foremost in your mind. That should be the number one priority before anything else. And I know that you have many things to juggle, but if that's gone, then that whole end of the island and the beaches is really gone. And the number of people that love those beaches, I have 3 people right now who've come from various parts of the country to help me get back in my house because they love it here so much. So thank you for that. Please, I ask you to use the thoughtfulness I've seen exhibited today in these discussions, and I appreciate the opportunity for more meetings with more information. And intent, as a lawyer, I think is critically important. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Deborah Scheckner.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Deborah Scheckner, Bocaziega Isle Drive in St. Pete Beach. You may not be aware that we are a D2 severe drought in St. Pete Beach right now. And we may want to look at that. I'm not sure how we can conserve water, but we may be asked to do that very soon. The next is an even worse drought. We don't have an architectural board, but I would like to see some kind of an architectural group brought together as Publix chooses what design they're going to do in St. Pete Beach. They have beachy, Mediterranean, Art Deco, boxy, Hunt Club, retro, neon, and that's just a few. And I think we have to get one that fits our city and looks absolutely beautiful. I'm glad somebody mentioned Thunder on the Beach. And they had, I'm sorry, the audacity to say they don't want to deal with the lights. These are turtles who are nesting. Don't hold an event like this in turtle season. It's really pretty simple. You can do it all other times of the year. Why are our turtles' nests and the turtles themselves have to be, I don't know, turtles are not going to come on the beach if there's a lot of people and there's a lot of noise. The eggs that are there, God knows who's going to step on those nests and crush them. If you go to Hutchinson Beach, they take their turtles seriously. They do everything to the letter. And I'm feeling in St. Pete Beach, we don't worry about the lights. And then you have somebody here who says, it's going to hurt us. Have it out turtle season. Turtles are an endangered species, are protected by local, federal, and state law. So I'm very, very confused why this is even happening. I'm not sure when the skimmers nest, so I apologize for that. But I think it also coincides maybe towards the end of turtle season. I think it's really, really important that we protect the turtles. If we don't, what are we here? We're not a beach community anymore. We're do whatever the heck you want. We don't care about our turtles. We don't care about our wildlife. You have a situation with the dunes. I mean, it's a mess. And I've written to them. I've written on their Facebook. I've written on their local site. Of course, I don't get any response. But I think we need to take a stand now. Are we for wildlife and turtles? Do we care about all of this? Or we don't? It's really very simple. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Can I say something? Skimmer season is at the same time as turtle season.
Robert Saison.
If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Robert Saison, 4506 Gulf Boulevard. I attended a very informative meeting this morning at the Beach Theater here on St. Pete Beach. So thank you to Hannah for hosting that, and it was for our Visit Clearwater and Visit St. Pete Clearwater. I'd like to share some data with you, if I can just pass this out really quick. Whenever
Give mine to the clerk.
So this actually was a recap of 2025 of what Visit St. Pete Clearwater did for tourism for our area. And it's actually quite impressive of how amazing the county we live in is. I mean, we live where people vacation, and we are blessed to be living here. If you look at the top right-hand corner, USA Today did the top 10 beaches in Florida. Clearwater Beach ranked number 2, Treasure Island ranked number 3, and St. Pete Beach ranked number 7. That's pretty impressive comparing to how many beaches are in the state of Florida. So we've got amazing beaches on 10. The Johnsons are making it there. I mean, we've got the Breakers hotels, you got the Ritz-Carlton hotels. You've got a lot of great hotels. And for us to be actually making number 1 and number 2 in this county is huge, and that's on Clearwater Beach. And Pearl was ranked number 8, Opal Sands was ranked number 14, Vinoy is ranked 15. So we've got amazing beaches, amazing place where we live, but the infrastructure on St. Pete Beach for the hotels, we're really not ranking. And that's what it comes down to. We are going to need to rebuild, and we need to come up with positive rebuilding. And if you look at the left-hand side, you can see by the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. $6.1 billion was spent by visitors this year in 2025. $387 million was generated by tourism. Of the $387,000 that was generated by tourism, $2,000, approximately $2,000 saves each taxpayer. So every person that lives in Pinellas County, every one of you here saved $2,000, and everyone behind me just saved $2,000 because of tourism. So we all need to thank a hotelier for being in business, because every person saves $2,000 per. So I only have 15 seconds left. This meeting was sent here today. There are 3 other meetings. There's actually a meeting tomorrow at the Tom James Museum in downtown St. Pete. The meeting is at 8:15 tomorrow morning, and it starts sharply at 8:30. So 8:15 is coffee, 8:30 is when the meeting is. It is normally RSVP. If you tell them that if you tell them that you're there with Robert, they will let you go because you are a commissioners and you're the mayors.
Thank you.
So,
Thank
Mayor,
you
if
for
you
your
just give me
comments.
5 more seconds to just finish my thought. Thank you.
Sir.
What I want to say is that I want you guys to make informative decisions, because the only way you can make informative decisions is by being educated. So I encourage this commission to go to the meeting. Karen was there this morning. I think she can vouch as well. So if you guys would please take the time tomorrow to go to the meeting to be educated on future decisions for our city.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
There are no more general comments.
Thank you, City Clerk. Next, we move on to the consent agenda. That's at the end. You can make that comment at any time you like, sir. You just can't make it twice. So you can't speak on that issue now, and then later when the issue comes up, speak on it again.
Jay Anderson, 202 Pasadena Way. On the dunes, just an aside, there are probably 30 park benches on Gulfway at between First and Second that have sat there for 6, 8, 10 months. They used to be scattered along the dunes on the water side, all up and down Pasadena, and it was great when you're going over to see sunset, you have a place to sit, but they're just sitting there. So maybe, city staff could look at that. I am here, though, to talk about the your item number 6C on the action agenda about the hardship case. I just want to make sure that you hopefully approve that going to the Historic Review Board that looks over things that are historic in Pasadena. St. Pete Beach has a great historic district, and so development there is important to the residents, and what happens there is important. The review board is kind of our sounding board for being able to make sure that we get the proper development in there. And this particular case, number 702 Pasadena Way, is important that it be reviewed by the Historic Review Board. So when that comes up tonight, please pass it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
There are no more general comments.
Next, we move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as,
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call?
Yes.
Commissioner Rosnicki?
Yes.
Commissioner Maldonado?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott?
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we move on to ordinances. The first one is 5A, first reading of ordinance 2026-01.
An ordinance of the City of St. Pete Beach, amending the City of St. Pete Beach Land Development Code, Sections 2.1, 3.10, 6.13, 6.14, 6.22, 7.4, 28.1, and 28.5 to increase front yard stair encroachments for specified residences, allowing retention of non-conforming balcony footprints and specified non-conforming residential accessory structures following substantial improvement to the primary residence, clarifying restrictions on non-conforming uses, and amending restrictions on elevated and substantially improved non-conforming structures, modify residential storage building standards, modify residential equipment setback standards, provide a front yard setback line alternative for residential cul-de-sac and curved street lots, and amend definitions and content of the Land Development Code to provide clarity and consistency with Chapter 98 of the Code of Ordinances and the Florida Building Code, providing for severability, codification, and correction of scrivener's errors, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you.
No presentation on this one. I just wanted to explain its purpose. You've seen the vast majority of this content previously. It came forward to you last meeting as Ordinance 2025-21. Part of the agreement that we put in place with the state to be able to adopt Ordinance 2025-17, which was the flood damaged equipment elevation standard, in advance of the Florida Building Code amendment, should that be passed, is that we would work with them on updating some of the language definitions, terminology, and references in our land development code to make it consistent with the Florida Building Code and the state requirements. This is a consolidated ordinance adopting or proposed to adopt the content of Ordinance 2025-21 as well as those updated state requirements. We just rolled it into one because they were so wrapped in with the sections that we were already working through. We made very minor modifications outside of those definition updates. We did add in one prohibition for clarity for historic structures. Those that are structurally connected, that are not a simple lateral addition, are still considered substantial improvement in the context of historically designated structures that is consistent with the Florida Building Code. So that's the most significant change here. Not something where we're going above and beyond. It's just bringing us into consistency with the Florida Building Code. Other than that, I didn't find there to be any significant changes with the content that you've already reviewed other than the definition updates. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Brandon. Commissioners, questions, comments? Commissioner Marriott?
So Brandon, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So this is has some different verbiage wrapped into it because when we passed these ordinances originally, or when we were originally talking about them, we were ahead of the Florida Building Code in making these necessary changes post-hurricane.
That was specific. It was for a separate ordinance. That was the flood damage equipment elevation ordinance, where we reduced that to 4 feet above grade when the home isn't being elevated. Part of the agreement in passing that was that we would work with them on amending our land development code, and that this accounts for both that as well as the preceding ordinance.
Perfect. So they've finally caught up to us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. City Clerk, are there any audience comments on this issue?
Walter Soa?
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the first reading of Ordinance 2026-01.
I second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Rosnicki?
Yes.
Commissioner Maldonado?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson?
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you.
5B has been continued to February 10th. That's the ordinance 2025-2024.
Thank you, sir. As has action item 6A, which then brings us to action item 6B.
This is approval of a settlement agreement and amended development order for the Red, White, and Booze LLC. With us this evening is Brendan Shearman from the law firm Henderson Franklin, who helped us with the co-counseling this case, and he's here to answer any questions. Basically, the settlement agreement memorializes the judge's temporary injunction. We were in favor of this settlement agreement. The likelihood of a successful appeal is low, and this would resolve the case. Basically, just take the judge's same temporary injunction order criteria and apply them to the conditional use. So we recommend approval.
Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, everyone.
Commissioners, questions, comments? Is there a general audience comment? Sorry, specific.
There are no audience
comments. Commissioners, is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve approval of the settlement agreement and amended development order for Red, White, and Booze LLC.
I second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Maldonado,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruznicki,
Yes.
and Mayor Petrillo.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you, everyone.
Next, we have action item 6C, the signed unnecessary undue hardship variance, case number 25142.
Yes, this was a request added to the agenda by the Historic Preservation Board at the Thursday meeting. Under Section 22-211 of the Code of Ordinances, those are the purpose, powers, and duties for the Historic Preservation Board. Item number 17, that the board can perform any other reasonable functions or duties related to historic preservation assigned to it by the City Commission. That is the basis for this request being made. And the Historic Preservation Board is specifically requesting to be able to review a forthcoming variance that will be heard by the Board of Adjustment on the 28th, the Board of Adjustment meeting on the 28th. They have requested that they be able to make a recommendation on that item to the Board of Adjustment prior to or at the hearing. They would be speaking as a board. Whether that would be a recommendation that staff then transfers or that is actually made by the board liaison at that meeting is yet to be determined. But I did want to note that we have 10 business days before that meeting. We do require a 10-day notice on any agendas for the Historic Preservation Board. They do understand that there will need to be a special meeting to make this recommendation, should this be something that the Commission supports. So we would send out and schedule it based on their availability. The authorized agent for the variance cases LLC is present. I don't know if they have a comment or not, but I spoke with them earlier about this request, and they are in attendance. Any questions for me?
No. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.
Are there any audience comments?
There are no audience comments.
Oh, there's a hand up over here.
If you'll please present a yellow card to the City Clerk. If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Yes. Hello, I am Brandon Tecklenburg, owner, 702 Pasadena Way. Be nice to sit here and talk to you guys about the freebie. I advertise on 3 of the freebies, and it's been amazing for my business. And it'd be great to talk about that tonight. Or I should be at baseball practice with my son right now coaching, but I'm not. I'm here to talk about my property at 702 Pasadena Way. I'm under contract since May. Should be closed. But I have had to constantly go to meetings, which I've showed up to every one, and I'm asking you tonight to not recommend the Historic Preservation Board to recommend anything to the Board of Adjustment. And the reason why is I want you all tonight, tomorrow, this week, watch my hearing on 702 Pacific Way from July. At the hearing, the board members for the Historic Preservation Board said where your seats are. Sean Hurley, sitting right there, said, my proposed building on my property is too high. It's too high. If it was too high, there'd be a variance. It wasn't too high. Dashel, sitting right here, said, they're going to build the largest building in Paso Grill. It's not the largest building in Paso Grill. I can name 5 buildings in Paso Grill right now, from 200 First Avenue up to 3200 Gulf Boulevard, that are larger. When you're in a power position here and you say these kinds of things, it's streamed. It's on the internet. All the local residents believe in what you're saying up here is the truth. You've researched. You've done your homework. My name, my property was slandered that day. No one's ever apologized to me. And I ask that you please watch that July Historic Preservation Board meeting. There was multiple false statements. There's no checks and balances. They can do and say whatever they want. And I've just learned in the last week that, Mr. Mayor and the commissioners, you elect the Historic Preservation Board, and that, or if you take over, they're in your position. I'm asking that they're reprimanded. I'm asking that you ask them to step down and replace people up here that are going to tell the truth, be honest, and not be biased. 702 Paso Grill Way, it's a simple variance I'm asking. There is an alley in the back of the property. It's only 9 feet wide. There's no way emergency vehicles, police vehicles, paramedics, anybody can drive back to this alley that has not been used in many years. We're all asking is just they use the driveway in front of 702 Paso Grill Way. That's been there since 1917. It's been paved, it's had cement there, different things, but we're trying to close on the property.
Thank you, sir.
And the Historic Preservation Board had another meeting that I had to go to in December.
Sure.
And now they're asking again for a last minute hearing again. Thank you much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments. Comments, questions, discussion? Commissioner Marriott.
Yeah, this is a question I think for staff or the city attorney. This is purely just for this single variance. This wouldn't be saying that any variance that's asked for in a historic district or otherwise would go before the historic board. This is just this one. Is that correct?
Well, this is a request in the city code 22-211, purpose, powers, and duties. On section D, the board shall also have the power and duty to 7, make recommendations to the Board of Adjustment with respect to variance requests applicable to historic resources designated pursuant to the Land Development Code. And then under 17, perform any other reasonable functions or duties relating to historic preservation assigned to it by the City Commission. That's my understanding that historic resource, it also includes in the definition districts, but this is not a historic designated property. It's within a historic district, but it's not a designated property. So it would be up to you to look at this code section, and also 7 and 17, even if it doesn't meet 7, in your opinion, you could send it there under 17.
Maybe I ask a clarifying question. I think the commissioner was asking if they grant this evening, is this project specific or are they granting forever?
No, this is just for this project tonight.
Was that your question? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I think my only comment about this is that and I'll defer to Commissioner Maldonado because I'm sure he's heard significantly more about this from, from residents in Pass Grill. It appears to me that the folks who have emailed me in support for this going before the Historic Preservation Board are looking for a rehearing of the entire project. And I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think this is specifically just for the Historic Preservation Board to give a recommendation on just the variance that's being asked for, which is just a driveway versus an alley. And so I don't know that having it go before the Historic Preservation Board is going to give anybody the satisfaction they're looking for. And so in this particular case, I'm not in favor of doing this. I don't think it's gonna make anybody's life better. I don't think we're gonna get any new information. I think we're gonna throw up some extra roadblocks for somebody who's trying to get a permit. And I don't see a positive outcome out of that.
So I think if I understand your question, I received numerous emails in support of having the Historic Preservation Board present a formal recommendation to the Board of Adjustments. Was that the question?
Well, just that I mean, like what my interpretation of the emails I've received is that the people who want the Historic Preservation Board to hear this really want to have a relooking at the entire proposal, but that's not what this variance is about. This is a very specific single item variance.
So I can't speak to that piece. All I can tell you is that I had overwhelming support for having the Historical Preservation Board follow the purpose, powers, and duties and obligations as outlined. I brought this issue to this commission months ago in a talking point, and that's exactly what I was citing. And I'm not going to rehash what our attorney just talked about in terms of quoting things, but I will tell you that it says shall, right? The board shall, and it's mandatory. We just haven't been following that, is my point, is that we have things out there to talk about city ordinances, and section 22-210 outlines those, and we're just not following them. Now, there may be cases in the past that it's happened, but I can't find any. So I do want the Historic Preservation Board to follow the rules, and that's what I'm asking. I'm asking us to, as a commission, treat everybody fairly, and that's why I asked we don't discuss this particular case down to the bones, because I want it to be as fair as possible. But I do think that we have an obligation to follow the rules, whether it's Historic Preservation Board, whether it's Board of Adjustments Board, any of the boards and committees. I expect us to leverage those and use those as intended.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the Historic Preservation Board's request to hold a noticed hearing to make objections, recommendations, or comments pursuant to City Code Section 22-211 D7 to the Board of Adjustment regarding a variance request for 702 Pass Grill Way, Board of Adjustment case number 25142, currently scheduled for January 28th, 2026.
I second.
City Clerk, if you can please do a roll call.
Vice Mayor Marriott?
No.
Commissioner Robinson?
Yes.
Commissioner Isnicki?
Yes.
Commissioner Maldonado?
Yes.
And Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have items for discussion. Commissioner Reznicki, you had one on legislation.
Yes. I'm trying to remember, getting my head back.
Legislation and resources, you said.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I'll get it together. For legislation, because I follow the Florida League of Cities, you know, and involved with them in their meetings. And there is, I don't know if you all know, but there's legislation days for Florida League of City, January 26th to the 28th. And they coordinate this for all municipalities. There is a date where I think it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, there's the second date where Florida League of Cities coordinates meeting times with the officials. And then there's the last day where you're free to have meetings yourself, right, with the officials. So I wanted to bring this up for discussion because I don't have another way of bringing it up with you all, because I'm interested in attending, because it's still open for registration, anybody who wants to attend, is that if we did, or if I did this, you know, and I don't know, and this is maybe legal, whether, I mean, more than one can go, we just don't do it together, right? But, oh, sorry.
Well, it's
Like
3
what we
days in
can-
Tallahassee, so I'm not sure how many people want to go. But if
No, I
you have
know.
two-
You don't have to go all 3 days, okay?
You just can't talk about city business together.
Correct.
So you would split up and maybe go to different representatives or senators. You wouldn't go at the same time to the same place.
Right. And I did reach out to Jim, I just lost his last name, to help coordinate meeting times, but wanted to know your thoughts on topic items, right? Because you have a very small amount, I used to do this before, by the way, for my prior job, prior days. It's kind of like talking points, elevator speech, you know, things that we want to bring to individuals about what the city is looking for, right? So, and many cities do this, and many of that I've spoken to, like Groveland, they do this every year, and they feel successful when they go and they speak to some or all of them in a unified voice about what the cities need. So, anyways, I just wanted to hear your thoughts, what you thought, if there's any particular like talking points to be brought up, maybe somehow, I don't know how to coordinate it, because obviously we don't have a lot of time, but how I put out, hey, this is the coordinated talking points that, you know, I personally am committed to talking to X, Y, and Z, or if anybody else wants to do the same thing, that we can go together, or one, or obviously it's not one by myself. I'm wanting to speak on behalf of the city.
It looks like it's 26th through 28th is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We have the next city commission is that Tuesday night. So we won't have time to get together ahead of time. But FLC does have a coordinated approach, and it's defending home rule. And it does give you an opportunity to go with our individual lobbyists to talk about city projects. So I think with the consensus of the commission, you could represent the city of St. Pete Beach as a member of FLC at that, unless there's any objection.
Just want to know your thoughts.
Yeah, we could also align with Shoemaker's broader presentation, and that's the reason they bring that, is so that staff is tracking relevant legislation. You all are ready to advocate on our behalf. We can also create talking points for you. I'm accustomed to doing that when we're sending elected officials in to meet with our representatives. So we have a team that works with our lobbyists, and we can prepare you for that. And I would suggest we focus on appropriations. We have some specific appropriation requests we're working on that would likely be the top priority.
The nice thing about it, too, is you get to meet with other senators and representatives from around the state who'll be voting on the bills, but not necessarily from our area that have offices here. We'll be seeing other people there.
Right.
So,
I know it works. I mean, I used to do it before, and it's very important. I mean, the city I'm talking about, they even take residents with them. I mean, I know we don't have all that time to do stuff like that maybe right now for this one, but it's very effective when you do get to do that. They all vote. It's not just the ones in our district, you know, so.
No, it is a good idea. I certainly would be open to joining you as well. I also think, if residents wanted to, be involved, I would ask the commission if you'd be, if you had any objections to allowing our lobbyists to kind of help facilitate some of those conversations. We had a great example tonight on the communications item, right? That was something that was, brought to us by residents. It was.
There's some Senate Bill 180 bills too, so.
Yes.
Another one that came up tonight.
I was gonna get to that as well.
And FLC is doing, Florida League of Cities is bringing that up as well.
So I think there's a good opportunity to coordinate with FLC as well as, if city manager has a list of infrastructure projects that need funding that we can approach. I know our local representatives have been, incredibly accessible and supportive. But there's 160, 180 of them. So there's more that we could be talking to. And if any of our residents wanted to come along, I certainly wouldn't have any objection. In fact, I would welcome that.
Yeah.
On your own dollar this time.
Right.
Maybe next time we can
rent a bus.
we can figure out a bus and we can sing Kumbaya for 7 hours straight to Tallahassee.
Right. I did, 2 residents did mention to me that they would be interested. The good thing is because you divide the 100 and some, right, that you want to make sure who you want to meet. And I did send an email to our lobbyist, and I said, well, I'll wait for a commission meeting to bring this up. And then I could email back to say, hey, can you coordinate the times for that Wednesday? Because it would be the third day where you're on your own. The second day, if it's with FLC, it's with the ones that they've already set up, which isn't bad to go to either, because there's some of the items, like we just mentioned, 180 and home rule, that they are targeting, so.
It'd be hard to get back for the commission meeting.
Well, no, right, but we're not traveling with them, so I mean,
no,
I would.
it's on the Tuesday.
Yeah, but I've done those drives. No, but they meet on the Wednesday. It's the Wednesday that they do it. I think the first day is just a tour for municipalities, so they just take you around the tour. I've been there, I don't need the tour. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate, I'm not able to go. I very much appreciate you and anyone else who can go, and I think it would be hugely valuable. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The other thing, and I called it, what did I say, resources. But this is something that, and I know Commissioner Robinson, you helped a lot, and I'm very appreciative of what the volunteers who assisted during the building, or for the building department during or after the hurricane. I'm just going to pass this. You guys don't have to read this all now, but this is kind of a summary of my thoughts, so that way you understand where I'm going with this. It's about revenue or resources, right? Volunteering, right? So we're looking. Oh, sorry. We're always looking for, or we're always discussing revenue sources, where we can get revenue sources, and we've dabbled on volunteers. Prior commissions have brought this up before. I remember one time, I think it was Commissioner Grill, brought up one that actually was in Largo's website. If any of you looked at it, we had our 4:30 meeting, and Largo was one of the cities that was mentioned in the presentation that has what they call VIP. It's a volunteer policing, basically, is what it is. It's VIP, but it's a volunteer policing where, and it's not that they're becoming deputy police by any means, okay, they're not carrying anything, but for some odd reason, that's what Largo calls them. But what they do is something that I think helps a lot of us, because we all get the same calls all the time, repetitive code enforcement, parking, whether it's derelict property, whatever it may be, it's constant, over and over. We hear it all the time. We send the emails over to the city manager, code enforcement goes out, but what they're doing is they're basically, and if you know nonprofits and some profits in the world, and I can speak for like Florida Aquarium where I volunteer. I used to work for them, they used to pay me, now I just volunteer. because they got very clever. They figure, why pay me? And I'm a professional diver, okay? Why pay me when I can do it as a volunteer? So they have reduced their operational costs by using licensed, certified people to provide services to their guests. I'm going to DAN training, which is Diver Network, is CPR basically, right? So I'm there for life support, you know. So I'm doing a hard job. I don't get paid for it monetarily. They give us money, well, not money. They give us incentives by giving us free memberships or free, amusement park entrance throughout Florida. That's what they do. Other places like SeaWorld, Disney World, all these parks do the same thing. Most of the people who work there are volunteers. They get free entrances to the parks, right? So anyways, it's kind of like increasing our staff, and obviously this would be in coordination, with, the city manager might have been thinking of ideas of this already, but to have a volunteer coordinator who's basically coordinating all these types of services, whether you have someone walking neighborhoods, and this is to repair what I call the C-click fix, which is broken, right? Because people like to put the C-click fix in, we can't track it. Some people don't like to submit it because they don't want to put their name out there. Or the issues that we hear over and over again on special magistrate, which is the short-term rentals. And I think, and I forgot where someone mentioned this, it might have been during commission, that we said, well, you could have someone just search for it, right? But it doesn't have to be a paid staff who could be using their resources elsewhere, right? It could be a volunteer who's looking and searching for short-term rentals, which I know our code enforcement spends time on it. But again, it's the idea of expanding our volunteer program that can do the things that prior commissions have talked about. We used to meet with the presidents of associations. I used to go to it. I don't think we've had one in forever. I don't know if any of you have ever attended, but we used to have association presidents all meet together in the city of St. Pete Beach. And in a lot of those meetings, we brought up the same thing. Why not have people volunteer, walk the beaches, whether it's garbage, litter, minor enforcement issues, right, that we're taking away from staff that can, again, be putting their resources elsewhere to doing other things. So I just want you to take a look at it, maybe have something, formalized, or I think it's a good time to bring it up because I know it's been brought up, but I feel because of what we did with the volunteers for the building department and how well receptive it was by this commission, that something like this could be receptive at the time. So just some thoughts for you all. Thank you.
And it's, no, I mean, the library uses volunteers.
Correct, they do.
Community Parks and Rec use volunteers. I know you've been there, so.
Yep, a lot, yeah.
So it's not, this is not, it's not something we're not doing, it's just a matter of expanding it.
Right, it's a matter of expanding. It's not that we don't have volunteers, it's to expand it. And if you look
My
at...
point was there's precedent.
Correct,
That's the word
correct.
I was looking for.
If you look at Largos, and Largos is just one of the many cities I saw, but if you look at Largos, just because we did talk about it or mention Largos site at our priority meeting prior to this meeting, if you go to their volunteer site, you'll see they'll have 9 different icons. And there's, I think I might have attached it there on this packet, but 9 different icons of the different things, whether it's the library, or if you want to do policing, or if whether, so it's kind of helping community, which we know, we have people who sit out here and like to volunteer. And it helps them find that niche of where they could put, some help into our city. The people who know what's going on the most in our city are the people who live here, So I think it helps when, I go around my neighborhood, and I heard, the commissioner earlier today while we were having lunch. This is not an action item, but we're just talking about walking, and you see the things, and you take pictures, and you submit it through C-Click and Fix, right? Because we could identify it. We know, we see it, right? So this could be very helpful. So it takes it away from a lot of residents having to do it because they think it's anonymous, but you can't do it anonymous, unfortunately. But it helps a lot of our residents, so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we have a wide range of experience and individuals that have just vast knowledge and vast experience that oftentimes you're just looking for a way to be able to contribute. I think this is I think this is how you and I both ended up on this seats, by getting involved in our communities and volunteering, and next thing you know, you're sitting up here. Commissioner Maldonado, I think that's how you ended up here as well.
Amen. Amen to that.
'Cause you were in the volunteer corps.
It's a great segue to anybody who wants to be a commissioner or mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Wisnicki, for coming up again with things to improve our city and our community, quite frankly. So thank you. The only one that I'm leery of is the very first one that says issue parking violations. Anything to do with enforcement, again, we've had discussions of SHIELD or SWORD, and Pinellas County Sheriff's Office has programs where they have volunteers and stuff. I just recently looked at it, and it's closed for applications, so they probably have so many. That might be something that we can look at, is having them leverage some of the volunteers. I know that they do, and if you look at the descriptions under there, very limited in power, so I wouldn't want to do anything that usurps what our contract sheriff department's doing, and then also put our citizens and residents in a precarious situation with friends and neighbors. So I don't support anything to do with parking violations. In terms of
And just before you leave that one, just so you know, if you look in Largo's, you'll see they have an application process, there's a training process.
I saw that.
It's not free fall by any means. Okay, it's very specific, and just like where I volunteer, you could be fired too, right? So
Sure,
just so you know
and open to conversations, but just giving you my
thank you.
my 2 cents, because I always think of physical safety as well, right? And I met twice this week with code enforcement out on Paso Grill, doing a great job, and I just check in on them because I brought some things to the city manager's attention regarding signage. Signage was brought up today, and making them more successful in their job. De-escalation and trying to help the city, enforce things that need to be enforced. And they struggle with it. And they get paid to do it. And that's their full-time job. So I'm leery about that. The other thing is with patrolling neighborhoods and parks, that may involve resources, whether it's vehicles, communications gear, and stuff like that. But again, I don't want to put people in harm's way. I will say that, unfortunately, the shuffleboard building had an incident that was reported to Pinellas County Sheriff involving their storage and equipment. So there may be a need for it. Somebody broke in. They thought it'd be fun to turn on the water and mess with shuffleboard equipment. So it may have been spotted or found after the fact, but I don't know that that's something that would reside within the realm of residents. Now, they can report it without having a volunteer structure through the non-emergency number, emergency if it's prudent, but the rest of it I think is incredible, right? I think that we talked about, the rental searches and checks in the past. Anything to do with pedestrian safety, absolutely. I'm not talking about crossing guards, but just observations and pointing out problematic areas, and we do run into constituents who bring up crosswalks in areas and things like you said. So this would be a good mechanism for them to express that to the parking ambassadors, right? If we went through with that, and the repairs in road signs, I can do 1, 2, 3. There's people that are doing 5 miles, 10 miles a day, and they're seeing things throughout the entire district. So, reporting and observations are great, but then it's a segue to a comment that you made about people, trying to leverage commissioners to put reports in for them. Code enforcement is a red line, but when it comes to click fix and things like that, they're force multipliers. So, I applaud you for bringing this into the discussion, and I think that there is some merit, as the mayor said, to enhance some of the things we have, just creatively and looking at it from a different lens. So, thank you.
Commissioner Robinson?
My only comment would be maybe divide it out as a departmental volunteer program. Might be easier to handle than an all-in-one inclusive. Some things code, some things, special events that's under Mandy's, domain versus, Pete's. Just, that kind of makes a little bit more sense, a little easier to tackle.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have staff reports. City Clerk,
I have nothing to report at this time.
thank you. City Manager.
Thank you. Just one report. I have a quick announcement on behalf of Code Enforcement Team. This year's focus for January is going to be shifting into the commercial sector, and they're going to be rolling out updates to keep the residents, business community, and stakeholders informed and engaged. One of the initiatives we're going to start providing an overview is our recently updated sign ordinance. In addition, we will be sharing information about the impact of short-term rentals within St. Pete Beach. As we believe, and we've heard from you all, this topic touches on many aspects of city life. Just a quick, this is a flyer they've created. They're going to be sending it out as an educational piece for anyone who comes into the office, but also as part of a proactive outreach online campaign to educate and let as many people as we know that we can about the rules in the city about short-term rentals. So that's the end of my report.
Thank you. City Attorney.
The city attorney would like to place on an upcoming agenda, you'll see an update to our city attorney contract with no increases in fees for 2026, and just to renew our contract.
Thank you, sir. District 4.
Just a reminder that this Thursday, January 15th at 6 p.m., the community meeting for the shuffleboard structure will take place at the Warren Webster Building. Seeking input, crucial that folks that are impacted attend. Thank you.
And what time is that, sir?
6 p.m.
District 3.
There's two community meetings, but association or neighborhood meetings. I was trying to look for the times, but I have to verify. But January 22nd, Lido was having their meeting, same place, same time, I'm sure. And Don Cesar Property Owners has theirs in February, which is their annual meeting. There's voting, and it's going to be here in City Hall.
And what date was that? 22nd? Sorry.
No, no, it's February, but I can't find it. And I was looking, and do you have it written? I know you have it because it's here in City Hall. It's at 6. We'll look for it.
Well, sounds like we have one more meeting.
I can find it. Yeah, I can announce it again. Just a heads up.
All right. District 2.
I just want to bring attention to a few items happening at the library this week. Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. they have a program entitled Bad Art. Thursday at 2 p.m. they have the Novel Ideal Book Club. Friday at noon they have movie. It's called Good Fortune. Saturday at 10:30 they have a presentation called The Golden Age of Japanese Culture. And also from 2 to 4 p.m. they have Tech Help.
Thank you. And District 1?
Sure. So it was, I know the Corey Avenue Business Association announced it, but I wanted to make sure no one missed that Sunshine State Tourism named Corey Avenue the best shopping district in Florida, best small town shopping district in Florida, which is super fantastic. I wanted to remind everyone in District 1 that there will be an informational meeting about the construction happening at Pump Station 1, I believe on January 21st. Yes, okay, January 21st here at City Hall. And then also anybody who wants to meet with me at Mastery's and come have a beer with a commissioner, I will be having those on Tuesday, January 20th and Tuesday, February 17th. So no actual beer drinking is required, but you're certainly welcome to from about 6 to 8 p.m.
And it's February 24th. I found it. I saw you writing your notes. You can get it.
All right. I received some good news today. So I know as unlikely as it sounds, there's still a fair number of individuals who still, are not quite sure what to do about their homes, still need help with their homes. And so I've been working with Hurricane Help Florida for the last year or so to help get funds to different residents, even our city staff. And so they let me know this morning that they just received another grant for $300,000 that they're looking for individuals and homeowners to help distribute those funds to help with critical repairs to make their home safe and livable again. So mold remediation, roof repair, replacement, drywall repairs, essential household items, including beds, furniture, appliances. So if you still know somebody who's dealing with unmet storm-related needs, I posted it on multiple different social channels earlier today, or you can reach out to me and I'll forward you the information. So help us provide a case-by-case basis, and it's a simple application. So they have, I've been to a couple of homes that they've done, and it's pretty amazing what they've come in. They've cut the drywall, they've done the drywall, they fixed the floors, replaced the roofs in some situations, appliances. They have, I think it was rooms to go that they're working with. They're doing special deals for them. So if for some reason you are still in this situation, or you know somebody who's in this situation, please apply. It's $300,000 is not much. It will go a long way because they also use volunteers and other volunteer organizations. But please, if you know somebody, point them to those resources. And so with that, thank you very much, and we are adjourned.